would say we are good to go. Over to you, Martin.
So thank you very much. So hello, everyone. It's really nice to meet you all, even this virtual studio. I'm Martin Michalik. I'm the VP of Product at Kontent.ai. And today I want to talk a bit about another technology evolution. And I want to talk about why do I believe it's different this time. And to give you a bit of context, I've been in this industry more than a decade now. It feels crazy that how fast the time flies, but during that time, I had a pleasure of talking, to many product teams, content teams, technical teams on the client side. But what always surprised me was that every time, the conversation kind of turned to, hey, what is your technology stack and how do you feel about your CMS or content management? People rarely smile. And for me, that was always kind of odd, because when you think about it, the goal of content management and CMS system was always to make lives of content teams easier, make it simpler. But something else happened along the way. Instead, things got a bit more complicated for the content teams, and they have more on their plate. So I want to talk today about what happened and why I feel this is going to be slightly different, and maybe there's some hope on the horizon for them. So in order to understand what happened, I want to go a little bit back in the history. And the great thing about content management systems is that they are always evolving. And as I mentioned, I've been here in this industry more than a decade. And what was great is that the platforms were continuously evolving. So we started around in 2000s with the web-centric CMS, which was a great revolution for content teams, because finally they could have page templates that can reuse. They were less dependent on developers, so the teams could do something themselves. Then we've seen the rise of the XP era, where more and more functionality was coupled with the CMS. So we suddenly started to see analytics. We started to see email automation. We've seen even email marketing, e-commerce functionality. And so the teams were even more empowered. Then we've seen the rise of headless CMS, which led to separation of how the content is structured and how the content looks like. So the teams could produce one content once and distribute it to a multitude of channels, websites, endpoints, you name it. And then we've kind of closed the circle with composable and modular DXPs that took kind of the principles of all the generations before and coupled it in one package. Again, gave people more freedom. Now, this was great for the end users, because they could choose from whatever the platform they want. But at the same time, it was a bit confusing. What is the right solution to pick from? And even for us as vendors, it was a nice competition. But it was all about doing more and more. But I realized that maybe along the way, and when we were shipping more and more features, we kind of forgot what the teams are actually struggling with and what are their issues. And I recall that when we had the conversations along the years, the issues really boiled down to two main issues, to two main variables that were, keep repeating over and over again. And that's those teams are actually struggling with time and people. So during those conversations, we had numerous mentions of, hey, we need to produce more content and faster, because our competition is producing more content faster. But there's a lot of manual repetition, so it takes too long to publish anything. We are really unhappy with the last replatforming, because it was supposed to be a brief project, and it took us almost 2 years. We are afraid to upgrade to a new version of our product because we're afraid it will put us out of business for 6 months when it comes to content publishing. Or we've heard that they are struggling with finding the right talent. I remember the struggles some technical teams had when technology moved from web forms to MVC, and then from MVC to any generic JavaScript technology. And so there was a lot of shift. And despite that, the teams were struggling with the amount of stuff they have to do. I told you that over the years, the technology added more and more tools to the content team disposals, but the teams weren't growing that much. So you had to have more and more stuff, to have more specializations on the team. So in reality, what happened was that the technology kept improving, and it really gave team more tools at their disposal. The teams were not growing, but what was actually growing was the content demand, because every year, and we did this survey as a company, every year, number one priority was, hey, we need to produce more content. So the pressure to produce more and better content is growing in every year, and especially since COVID, when everything literally exploded and the business goals kept growing and growing, the teams really are feeling under pressure. What is actually the other less pleasurable side of the story is that their team's capacities were in recent years sometimes reduced, sometimes even more significantly. So the pressure was even higher. So now, when you think about it, if you are on a content team, this is probably how you feel these days, that you need to produce more, you need to manage more channels, more touch points, your budget is being cut, and your team is smaller. So this is your everyday reality. You are under a lot of pressure. So if you know someone on a content team, please go and hug them, because they probably need it. But now let's think about what the technology can do for them, because I do believe there's a change happening in the background that will have a significant impact. And the change, of course, as you probably guessed, is around AI. But I want to explain what exactly is happening. So we all know that artificial intelligence is a big deal, and especially if you go on LinkedIn, you're probably going to be bombarded with, hey, you need to go AI, otherwise you'll die. It's not that serious, but it's quite serious. So what happened and how the AI changed the way how we think about content production. So before AI, everything was done manually. So you had your content task, everything had to be done by someone. It was done by humans, and they had some tooling support. That tooling support evolved over time, but pretty much everything was still manual. Then we've seen the rise of large language models in different interfaces on top of these LLMs, and their availability, being readily available, which led to a fact that we've started to see, even in the content management space, rise of tools that help with something we call augmented content creation. So you still have humans in control, humans who are producing content, but they are to a degree using AI, to boost your productivity, to apply some suggestions, to do some transformations. But most of the time, we've seen that these efforts were centered around content creation itself. Now, there's a small problem with that, because when we again talk to these clients, I need to ask them, hey, how do you feel about, letting AI do all the stuff that you do and create your content? People were not particularly happy, because they were feeling similar to this. They actually enjoyed and treasured the content creation they do. They wanted to do their content creation because they felt that this is something that is unique to their company, their content, their style, their brand, and they wanted to preserve that. But they were drowning in the amount of work that is surrounded, when you create something. So actually, they were drowning in that laundry, if I can use the metaphor from the slide, and they were not actually able to do that art and writing that they actually wanted to do, because they had to do the laundry. So, and this was a situation, and it still is in many organizations, that when you ask them, hey, how are you adopting AI? And they're like, hey, we don't really want to do that, because we want to create our content in an authentic way, which is fair. But now we have another evolution when it comes to AI, and that's the fact that we now have agentic systems readily available and more accessible than ever, and cheaper. And that leads to something we call autonomous content management. And I will show you a few examples of what it means, where AI really takes over the laundry and takes over the predictable work where humans really oversee the strategy and exceptions, and they're more in the control room, control role. Now, when I talk about agents, I want to clarify what I mean when I talk about agents, because still some people are not, on the same page, and I want to clarify that. So AI agent is something that is an autonomous end software. It's similar to what we are used to in different software. It's a software. It runs somewhere in the cloud, but there are a few differences. So it runs independently, and you define the goal. You don't define the individual steps like you would do in the traditional software step by step, but you give it a goal and the tools at the disposal. You also give it a context. So the better context you give the agent, the better it will perform. And it also has some tools at its disposal. So the more tools you gave it, the more it can do. But you can also give them specialized tools. So you can have agents that are specialized for SEO optimization. You can have agents which are essentially tools that will categorize your content against some criteria. You can have agents that are just scraping your analytics, and another agent that is just creating reports. What is great about agents is that they can collaborate, and I'm going to show you what it does. So how is that changing CMS paradigm, this collaboration? So let's take a process that is actually quite scary for many organizations. That's content audit. Because content audit is something that is quite expensive. It takes multiple people, it takes multiple weeks, sometimes months, and there's so many things that can go south before you finish the audit. And the worst part about content audit, majority of work starts when you actually finish the audit, because you need to act on the findings of the audit. You need to create a plan and execute on the plan based on the findings. So that's the reason why in many organizations it's rarely done, or it's done before you migrate to a new platform, or it's done on, let's say, a yearly basis, but that's about it. And as a result, in many organizations, when it comes to content quality, it differs throughout the year, and it differs between these audits. Now, what if I tell you that you can actually do that much faster and with less resources? Because if you start delegating these flows to agents, you can do several things. First of all, you need to define the goals of the audit. But even here, you can have LLMs that are trained with expertise on content audits to help you with the definition of the audit. Now that you have it, you can delegate it to the system that will run a series of agents collaborating together that will first collect the data for evaluation. They will pass it to another agent that can go through your content inventory, and then, again, you give a goal how to categorize the content, and it will assign the categories for you, so you don't have to do that. Then you can have an agent that will have these segments already categorized, and it will perform analysis against your goals, and they will prepare the report for you. So again, you have the steps outlined. And as the technology is getting better, you can more and more hand over the execution on these changes to the agent. So some of you might have that your own experience when you, for example, work with ChatGPT, that you prompt it, you do several iterations on your work, and they are already suggesting what could be the next steps, and then you just say, hey, yes, do it, execute it. So in a similar fashion, you can do that with CMS. So what happens is that you are reducing a process that took multiple people into essentially a single person running the query. Instead of months and weeks, you get the results more or less on demand. Sometimes it could be multiple hours if you have a huge content inventory, but it's definitely more manageable. And instead of paying, that work and labor for the weeks and months, you have actually execution costs in the system that are significantly lower. Now, if you think about it, if you can get these things on demand and with low costs, why not to get them every day? So essentially what you can do, and as the technology evolves, you can turn a process that's scary and turn it into a widget, because you will get these updates every day. Let's say when you drink your morning coffee, and you either get disappointed or very excited based on the findings. but you can do that. So the system will work, and against this criteria will match what is happening. Now I'm going to give you another example of how the paradigm is shifting when it comes to using artificial intelligence, and that's search. Because search traditionally is a very technical thing. If you think about it, you need to form a query. Sometimes the queries are more or less nicer versions of SQL query, because you're specifying what you're looking for with specific parameters, with specific dates and other parameters in the query, and that you get exact matches. Now, this is great when you know how to form the query, but let's be real. We have more and more non-technical folks entering the world of content creation, and the content, we have more content that is more difficult to navigate. So what if you could use natural language instead? What if you could say, hey, I'm looking for a content that was very likely produced by Michael or whatever, and it was roughly produced in the last 12 to 18 months. And the system would give you the results, but maybe the system can also give you additional results. Hey, I know that you've been looking for content that was produced by this on specific topic, but there's another content like that that is produced by Kelly, and there's another content produced by Michael, but it's older than 18 months. Because the system understands your query and it can expand it and search some adjacent content. Or what if you could, for example, like you see on the screen, just pass a file and tell it, hey, this is a new legislation regarding the weight loss medications, and we have a lot of content about weight loss medication. We need to identify which content is actually affected by this medication, this legislation. So list it and group it by severity of the impact. And the system or the agents will go through that PDF, because that's already possible today. They will analyze it. They will create their, summarize the changes, and then they will go and crawl through your content and understand the changes and flag the issues. So instead of, again, going through inventorization of your content and spending weeks on finding the right content and trying to understand what the legislation is, again, you can literally outsource that to technology. And the final example that I have for you, how I feel we will see more and more of AI being implemented and doing the heavy lifting, doing the laundry, is, for example, A/B test. Again, A/B test is something that is quite technical. You need to understand the setups. You need to configure everything, which can be a lot of clicking and pointing and spending time in the UI actually and setting things up, instead of defining what you want to test and analyzing the test results. But again, what if you could have a conversation with the system and say, hey, I want to test this page and slight variation. Here's some draft how it could look like. Adjust the content according to this draft, and let's set up the test together. And the system will create the new variant. It will say, hey, this is the new version. Do you want to check it out? Do you want to do something else with it? And then let's configure the test and let's direct 10% of the traffic there, for example. Again, it's a more natural way of working, and you don't even have to have a typing session here, because we see that more and more that people are talking to their computers instead of typing, because the transcription tools, especially now, are getting much better. So you are changing something that was a lot of pointing and clicking and setting up things somewhere in the UI into a casual conversation. So instead of that being a system that is very rigid and you need to know it very well, you are more of a sort of talking to a virtual colleague that is actually going to do the work, which I feel is really a nice metaphor what the paradigm shift is actually representing. So I do believe the promised land is close, and it will unlock a new operating model. So what we'll see is that the teams will get results much faster. There will be compression of time to impact, because you will be able to reduce some of the heavy lifting with technology. At the same time, when you can offload something to technology, you will see that people, I don't want to say have to think less, but the cognitive load is reduced, so they should be more relaxed and focus on what matters. At the same time, you get scalability, because what those people really struggled was the scalability of how can we do as a team do more and maybe something different than what we do today. And as I mentioned, the agents are as good as the tools that you provide them. And if you provide them with some state-of-the-art LLMs, and we start to see more and more precise LLMs that are targeted, let's say, towards law and legislation, and can analyze that, or you can see more and more tools optimized for SEO, GEO, and things like that. You will have agents that have these tools at their disposal, so you even have that expertise in your team. And why is it all important? Because when it comes to content lifecycle, we see that teams today really focus on the right-hand side of the circle, because this is where most of the energy and time goes today, to how to plan the content, how it should look like, how to design it. And now let's make sure that everything is aligned and we can publish it out at once, and all the effort goes there. But what if we can automate majority of this heavy lifting and the laundry? Maybe it will give us time to focus on things that actually matter, how we can ideate better content, how we can measure what works and what not, so we can actually get our content through the noise. Because if you think about it, and I really do believe that we're living in a world where we are being bombarded with content. I don't think there's a single person that sits on the couch in the evening and says, man, I wish there was more content I could consume today. But I do believe that producing more is not the winning strategy going forward. And we already see that in some industries, that producing more content is not bringing better results. I do believe it's better content and higher quality and content that actually works, and we know that it works, that wins. And with Agentic CMS, I do believe that we have, and we will have, tools to make it. And that, to me, is the shift. And that's all from my end.
Excellent, Martin. And you even left us, perhaps thanks to all the automation and time savings by the agents, you even left us with some time for Q&A.
Sure, go ahead.
Thank you very much for a very inspiring deck. I think there's a lot in there. As promised, I will write it up and share it, but let's use the time for questions, comments, reflections, and let's start in Scotland. David.
So, just for fun,
Yeah.
I'm going to ask the contrarian question today. So, if we look back at, the television programs that were around in the past where they would say what life would be like in the year 2000,
Yeah.
and how nobody would do any work and everything would be automated, and we would all live a life of leisure.
Yeah.
I was thinking about that when you were talking about how the promised land was nearly here. So why is it going to be different this time? That is to say, why is this particular round of new technology going to result in less work and not just more of a different kind of work?
Yeah, very good question. I do think because of the scale that the technology is, changing the workflows. The example is the best example is the content audit. You go from months to minutes, essentially, which is a massive reduction. And I do believe that as the tools will, get better, most of the heavy lifting that we do today will be different. So I don't think that the teams, will sit on the chairs and, rolling them thumbs and not do anything. They will be occupied for sure. But what I hope is that it will give them time to focus on things that matter, which is because going back to the conversation with clients, when you talk to content teams and ask them, hey, so what is your content strategy? What do you measure? What is your plan? You rarely get any, let's say,
Did you just freeze?
Yes, that was I'm like, okay, wow, you really had us there, in the moment of suspense. But it was a good comment, David, on time savings. I think There is a backlog to create better content. I think most organizations have that, just like they have a backlog to create more apps and websites, and you could argue whether they need it or not. But I think what we're seeing with AI in general is just an acceleration of being able to build faster and do these things faster. But I would agree with you, David. It's not like it seems work is going away, but we can do more. Right now, we can release it in 9 languages instead of just 2, right? Before Black Friday. So Martin, are you back?
I am back. I don't know what happened.
It's
Maybe the AI overlords decided to cut me off. So
I don't know you as the person that normally pushes blame to somebody else, but thank you, Martin. It's good to have you back. We have time for 1 or 2 more reflections, comments, questions on what you just saw and heard. Thanks for also getting us started with the timeline to put things in perspective, and also doing an explanation of agents. What are they actually in a CMS context? And I think the content audit example is a powerful one. If I remember correctly, Martin, what you showed us in Montreal was an example of demilitarizing language.
yeah, so it was actually a simplified version of the audit, and I can even show you the recording to put that in the article, where the agent actually goes through the inventory, assess the types, assess the content, and then gives you the results. And then you can tell it, hey, change this. And it really also depends on how comfortable you are now, like letting AI do stuff. I feel that we will need to get used to that a bit. But yeah, the direction is there.
I will make sure to add a link to the very impressive demo in the blog post. It was fun. It was a kind of an eye-opener to seeing this use of militarized language and how easy it was to get it out there. So thank you very much. Thank you to everybody who joined. We are right on time for a change. I appreciate that. Very good to hear more about Agentic CMS. Thanks for sharing at the forefront of innovation. Really appreciate it, Martin, and great work for you and the rest of your team and product. Quite impressive.
Much.
All right. See you soon.
Right.